We now have Karen Freeb, who's a partner of Berwin Leighton Paisner, who's going to come up to the stage. Karen's been a great supporter of ours over the years. She heads up the hotels team at Berwin's, has been on the conference circuit supporting my events in Dubai, Moscow, and Berlin. So please, if everybody can show that you're welcome to Karen Freeby, who's going to host the session, Economic Context, right?
Thank you very much,
All right,
Jonathan.
thanks.
Thank you. So thank you, Jonathan, and very warm welcome to everyone today. It's my great pleasure to introduce, first of all, Mr. Gerald Lawless, who is going to set the scene for our panel debate on the economic contest that's facing our industry. As President and Group Chief Executive Officer of Jumeirah Group, Gerald Lawless has helped establish Jumeirah as one of the premier luxury hotel brands in the world. He joined the company in 1997 after a 23-year career with Forte Hotels, which culminated in him setting up and growing Forte's operations in the Middle East. Taking on the challenge of launching the Burj Al Arab, the world's most luxurious hotel, after the successful introduction of the Jumeirah Beach Hotel to an eager travelling public, Mr. Lawless went on to become President and Group CEO of Jumeirah, which currently has 23 properties under management in 12 destinations, with at least another 20 under development. So, Gerald, if you'd like to come to the stage and set the scene for our panel debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Karen, thank you very much for the lovely introduction. And I'm just going to take you through sort of a slideshow this morning. I hope the first one will start okay. And I just want to demonstrate here that you don't have to be the Mayor of London to have a wacky hairstyle. That's me back in 1978, working with Forte in Glasgow, dreaming of camels, evidently, and hopefully eventually going to Dubai. And I've been asked this morning just to talk a little bit about Dubai's own success story in doing what it has done, particularly for tourism. And lots of people say, wow, in 1978 when you first went there mustn't have been very much there. But actually, it was a small city, very much based around the creekside, which still exists today. But as you can see, it wasn't exactly just a bit of sand. It was already quite a busy place with a very good future. And just on the outskirts of Dubai, as it was then, I hope you can see that, but these apartments on the left-hand side, I moved into in January 1979. That was the view then when my wife and myself moved in, and this is the same place today, which has really come on quite a bit, as you can imagine. Also, all these before and after photographs, but this was Dubai Airport in the mid-70s or early 70s. And we all know about what's happened in Dubai Airport today. Approximately 70.5 million passengers in 2014, has now surpassed Heathrow as the busiest international airport in the world, and has 2 runways, but has another airport already under construction in Dubai, which will be able to take up well in excess of 120 million passengers by 2022. So hopefully somebody might think differently about extra runways in either Heathrow or Gatwick, as we will hear later this week, I hope. Thank you. Dubai Duty Free also celebrated 30 years recently with $1.8 billion of duty-free sales, and is now the largest single duty-free operation in the world. I think we all know in travel and tourism that without the airline, especially in the hospitality industry, without airlift, without an airline, we have no chance or no hope, especially in a place like Dubai, of actually achieving any kind of progress in the world of tourism and travel. This was Emirates Airlines' first aircraft in 1985, where they leased this 727, and from PIA they leased 2 737s. This is Emirates today, which we show at nearly 50 million passengers in 2014, with almost 80% seat occupancy. It's also interesting to note that Today, Emirates has 5 A380s a day to Heathrow. They have 4 services to Gatwick, at least 2 to Birmingham, 3 to Manchester, 2 to Glasgow, 1 to Newcastle, and even 2 to Dublin, which is quite something. But it is an amazing achievement for the airline. And it's also very interesting to listen to all the discussions, debates, and everything that's coming out of the United States airlines and indeed some European airlines about support from various governments to the Gulf airlines. Emirates Airlines does not get support from its government, and very much is probably the opposite. And at the same time, we see that we within the World Travel and Tourism Council, for example, say that we are supportive of open skies. We need open skies. We need this to continue for our industry, and I hope that it will continue for many years to come. This is the prediction at the moment for Dubai Airport and for its travel development over the coming years. Approximately, as I said, 73 million passengers today, and by 2020 we expect to be up to 126 million passengers. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about the brand that has made me so well known, and thank you very much, and thank you to the opportunity Dubai has given me, and indeed His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, who has done so much to develop tourism and to develop the airline within Dubai. This was in 1978 or 82. This was the Chicago Beach Hotel, and this now is where the Jumeirah Beach Hotel and the Wild Wadi currently stand. Have we got the video? Something might happen. And there, we took it down. It was built in 1982 and we demolished it in 1997. But Dubai has been very strong in developing homegrown brands that I've just talked about, very much so through Emirates Airlines and indeed through our own Jumeirah brand. And we know that within travel and tourism, and it's very interesting to hear the Minister talk about it, everybody talk about the importance of our jobs that are created in travel and tourism. And the World Travel and Tourism Council has issued these figures to demonstrate just how important our business is. Over 1 billion people travelled internationally last year. And we should celebrate that. We should be happy about that because it is creating amazing jobs. As a GDP share worldwide, travel and tourism, and I say hospitality as well, is now almost at 10% of global GDP, providing 277 million jobs worldwide, and so many of them entry-level jobs. And when we hear about unemployment of under 25-year-olds in Southern Europe and in Greece and all of these countries, and indeed in Ireland, it is so important that travel and tourism and hospitality is recognized for what it is. 277 million jobs and 4% growth per annum, which is well ahead of what's been achieved elsewhere in the world. And within Dubai, where we have worked very closely with what's called DTCM, the Department of Tourism and Commerce Marketing, we are now up to 13 million visitors, heading for 20 million visitors by 2020. That makes us the 5th most visited city in the world, and this is a city of 2 million people. And 20% of the state of Dubai, of the Emirate of Dubai, 20% of its GDP actually comes from travel, tourism, and hospitality. We should be very pleased about that. Many people ask, what are we doing with the amount of hotels we're building in Dubai? And as a hotelier, I can say, yes, it is challenging, it is scary, but from the point of view of Dubai Inc., Dubai Tourism, we will always remain extremely competitive because of the number of hotels that we have. This chart here shows, for example, in London has approximately 125,000 rooms with 154 visitors per room. Singapore has 270 visitors per room. And Dubai has only 156 visitors per room, which really shows that we will remain and continue to be competitive with our average room rates, and that we will continue to attract tourism from all over the world. My next slide actually shows where the industry is heading. In Dubai, we have now 611 rooms, which is approximately 84,000 keys, going to 114,000 keys and 751 hotels by 2016. So if you add into what Airbnb is also doing in Dubai, I think that's an awful lot of rooms and service departments, and will certainly keep us on our toes for many years to come. Going to 145,000 keys, 800 rooms by 2020, when we will be welcoming, of course, the World Expo 2020. And here we're expecting unique visitors of upwards of 25 million people for that actual event, which will start in October 2020, with 182 countries, nearly the whole world participating. And we're looking to create 277,000 jobs within the industry in Dubai during that period, when we would be already up anyway to 20 million visitors. I always like to talk about the value of travel and tourism to communities and to society generally. And I think in these very sad days when we see these atrocities in Tunisia and in Kuwait and in France, we have to be reminded as well of the value of our industry to society. In Dubai, Sheikh Mohammed set up the Sheikh Mohammed Center for Cultural Understanding about 15 years ago, where actually every Thursday we invite guests from our hotels to go to one of the main mosques in the Jumeirah area. And there they receive a lecture from an imam who talks to them about the similarities of the religions of Judaism, of Christianity, and of Islam. And really these guests come out thinking, wow, I've enriched my life by coming on holiday to Dubai. I've actually got to know a little bit more about the community here. I've got myself engaged in it. And it really does work. And I think another area where we know that within our hotels particularly, we can reach out to the local community. We can be part of the local community. Here in Dubai, we have already released over 700 turtles, which we have rescued from the Gulf. We've brought them back to health in the seawater tanks of the Burj Al Arab, and then we take them across to Medina Jumeirah, where we have seawater canals, and make sure they convalesce properly. And then on some of the very large ones, we put trackers on them, and you can follow them on our website around the world to see where they're going. But it is a great thing to do with the local community. We get the local schools and everybody else involved, including our guests staying in the hotels. So ladies and gentlemen, that's just a quick snapshot before we start the panel discussion to show you that what I think is great about Dubai, what Dubai has been able to achieve, and the fantastic career opportunities it's given to everybody, including myself, and what a privilege it has been to work there on and off since 1978. Thank you very much for your attention.
Very good. Thank you very much, Gerald. And I'd like to welcome to the conference platform our other 5 panelists for our hopefully exciting debate on the economic contest. So first of all, could I please welcome to the stage Faith Taylor, who is the SVP for Corporate Social Responsibility at Wyndham Worldwide. Welcome, Faith. Please take a seat. Brett Tolman, the CEO of the Travel Corporation. Brett, are you able to join us? Thank you. Margaret Ritchie, MP for Southdown. Margaret. Pedro Ortun of the European Commission, Principal Advisor in DG Grow. And finally, Peter Gow is the CEO of Travelodge. I'd very much like to ask each of our panellists to give a very brief introduction to themselves before we start our Q&A session, which we hope to continue until approximately 10:15, and then we'd like to throw open the floor to questions from you. So, Pedro, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and about your passion for our sector?
Yes, good morning to all of you. I think I am a lucky man. I've been spending 36 out of my 40 years of professional career in European affairs, which might sound strange within a British audience like this one, but it is a passionate and a challenging type of tasks, out of which I've been 27 years as director in DG Enterprise Industry Growth. Now it is called DG Growth since last November. I have had the chance to cover all manufacturing sectors and many services sectors, those who are not regulated, like banking, telecom, and others. And out of them, tourism. I'm lucky to have been for 15 years and a half the director for European tourism policy. and also for 13 years, the director in charge of the corporate social responsibility strategy and process. And now from last June, as you have said, as I'm becoming less young, I have been nominated principal advisor to conclude and to coordinate and to finalize the two forthcoming strategies on tourism and on CSR at European Union level.
Thank you. I actually learned a new word from Pedro yesterday, which was co-opetition. Is that the way you pronounce it? So hopefully you'll be able to explain a little bit more about that to us. Peter, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Peter Gowers, the Chief Executive of Travelodge. It was the first value hotel chain in the UK 30 years ago this year, in 1985. We now are together with my colleague Paul from Whitbread, who will be here later this afternoon. Premier and Travelodge, the two largest hotel brands in the UK. Before joining Travelodge, I spent 10 years with IHG, latterly as the Chief Executive of their business in Asia, dealing with the same kind of growth curves that Gerald was talking about on the slides earlier. And my passion really is twofold. It's for the force of tourism for good in the wider world, not just as an economic good, which it clearly is, but also, as Gerald mentioned, for the passion of bringing people together and helping people understand the culture and values of one another. And secondly, I'm a passionate advocate for Britain. This is a great country. Later, we're going to hear from the country's principal flag waver for tourism, the Mayor, and I think we should all be much more behind him, and he shouldn't be the only one waving a flag for tourism aggressively. We should be doing more of it. More prosaically, I guess I'm the man to blame. If you're sick of hearing the words, "That's Travelogical," from your radios and televisions, I guess you can come and complain at me later, as several people already have.
Thank you very much. Faith.
Sure. I'm Faith Taylor. I'm with Wyndham Worldwide, and when people think of Wyndham, they think of only hotels, but we actually have timeshares, we have rental exchanges in 100,000 locations in 100 countries. I oversee our corporate social responsibility program, and I'm passionate about innovation and about collaboration, which Ufi had mentioned. And what does that mean? At the end of the day, I'm about making a difference and having responsible growth. And responsible growth for me means taking the leadership position in terms of reporting and developing guidelines for the industry. So we've actually used the GRI and a carbon disclosure project that have been recognized by the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for being the world leader in reporting on sustainability. I'm also passionate about collaboration and have worked with many of the organizations right here in the UK. International Tourism Partnership has been a tremendous partner, and we've developed metrics for the industry, such as the Hotel Carbon Measurement Initiative, which you need in order to be able to compare different hotels to each other. And that's just one. In the United States, working with the Clinton Global Initiative, working with the Obama administration in terms of the Department of Energy and developing solutions and practices that the private industry has worked with government hand in hand. And I think that's an opportunity to learn how we've been working together, despite, as you know, the challenges in terms of the Congress, but we still have been developing solutions for sustainable and responsible growth in that part of the world. And then lastly, when I really look at it, it's all about the people. And so when we really work with all of the different organizations in collaboration, innovation is critical. And we use technology. And I think that's the platform, the digital economy, and really being able to utilize that and develop solutions will help us accelerate what we need to do. So I'm really excited to be here to talk about what we're going to do. And so I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Faith. Brett.
Good morning, everyone. Brett Tolman. Travel Corporation is a family-run business. We have 30 brands which have been bringing travelers to the United Kingdom for many years: Trafalgar Insight, Kentucky, Creative Holidays, and others. We're also deeply invested in this country with Red Carnation Hotels. So we certainly have a very strong and passionate belief and understanding of this industry and of this destination. I'm very passionate about our people. We're all in the service industry, and obviously it's our people that deliver each and every day. Wonderful touch earlier on bringing your people up here to recognize them. They really are the ones who make a difference. It's a remarkable world we live in today. It's over 7 billion people. So many of the destinations that this country competes with are doing a remarkable job to draw people to their borders. I arrived here as an American passport holder, and on most days at Heathrow, whether it's Terminal 3, I came in yesterday, or Terminal 5, the wait can be up to a couple of hours, whether you're on a fast track, where there's usually one person there, or general admissions. I don't go to any country, and I've visited 16 in the past several months, where you have more supervisors, or whatever those chaps and ladies are, standing behind the individuals, giving you access to this great country. In the United States, there's no one other than the people working the desk. So it's a great example of when you see the Visit Britain ads going on in the airport, welcome you to Britain. But we couldn't do a better job, for example, processing people through. The United States has had their challenges, but as we saw several years ago, they brought a phenomenal number of additional people into China in order to process visas for China, something this country could do. So just a couple of insights in terms of the competition we face bringing more people to this country. We used to bring about 300,000 people to the United Kingdom. Today that number is more like 200,000 for all the reasons that Ufi and many in our industry do fight passionately about. Like Faith, I'm also very passionate personally about sustainability and protecting the great wildlife, places and cultures that our travellers visit each year.
Thank you, Brett. Margaret.
My name is Margaret Ritchie. I'm a Member of Parliament representing a constituency in Northern Ireland, the constituency of South Down, where tourism is the principal economic driver, whether it's outdoor recreation, golfing, where the Irish Open was held in my constituency some 3 to 4 weeks ago, or whether it's heritage tourism. For me, tourism is a labour-intensive industry, as has already been characterised by Ufi in terms of the numbers that visit the UK and Ireland every year. And as a consequence of that, I saw Parliament as an opportunity to persuade the Treasury, along with like-minded MPs from other parties, to persuade the Treasury to ensure that the VAT level on tourism products, whether it's food, attractions or activities, is reduced as a means of attracting more people, as a means of sustaining and contributing our local, regional economies, as well as the wider UK economy, and also to act as a stimulus to job creation. Whilst it is a labour-rich industry, there is so much opportunity to increase that level of jobs within the wider sector. And I suppose this morning I was slightly disappointed to hear that the Minister didn't outline what those fiscal flexibilities could be in the Chancellor's budget next week, because I believe there are opportunities and it could be a revenue neutral measure along with other incentives such as zero passenger duty. And in fact, my constituency borders the south of Ireland, where VAT on tourism is 9%. So this is very much about competitiveness. It's about developing our economy and ensuring that we are number one and how we can do that. And we have been able, in terms of the wider Westminster Parliament, to secure like-minded MPs who support such an initiative.
Thank you, Margaret. And that's very much our key theme for today. How can the UK tourism and hospitality industry learn? How can we learn from each other, from other nations, to make ourselves more competitive? And just really following that theme and coming back, Pedro, to your co-opetition concept, what kind of strategies do you think that an innovative and responsible tourism business, individually and in a co-opetition sense, should put in place in a sustainable way, with a view to growing the industry?
Well, what I meant and what we mean in the European Commission jargon with this relatively new word is that industry at large, not only the tourism one, but in particular tourism, which is made of a huge and very diverse number of branches of sub-activities, has to learn to work better together. Not only individually, as each individual company, they have to take profit and they have to look for their individual competitiveness, but they have also to work much more and better together in the sense that tourism and the whole tourism activity and the whole tourism value chain, if I may call it that way, has to get a much stronger and a much larger recognition of its political importance, taking into account the socio-economic importance. You should know, probably you know, that tourism, only the core business of tourism, is the third biggest socio-economic activity in the European Union. And if you include in tourism all the different other activities which are linked to it, like transport, like parts of retail, parts of construction, parts of gastronomy, and so on, it is the second one after the retail. And I can tell you, tourism is not the best organized, both in public institutions and in the industry, to ensure that it is given the sufficient political importance that it should be given. And that is in part because, in our view, we in the institutions, but also the industry, at European Union level, has not been able to organize itself or themselves in a much more collaborative way, cooperative way, keeping each of the businesses and branches its own individual type of objectives and priorities, but also identifying issues of common interest and working much more and much better together to improve the image, the innovative characteristics, the contribution that tourism can provide to a lot of goals, not only economic goals, but also social goals, environmental goals, peace-related objectives, and so on. Tourism is a jewel as an activity. It's the most beautiful and the most complex, by the way. I have had the chance and the opportunity to in some way coordinate from the European Commission, but it has to make huge improvements in its own internal organization.
But what do you think are the key challenges that we face in the UK, and how do you think that those
Well,
might
the
best be
UK, I think they are quite similar to the whole of the rest of the European Union. Apart this internal challenge, which I've been not surprised, but I've been in some way happy to see that these type of challenges are also quoted, have been quoted by several of the precedents, Ufi, the minister herself. I think tourism has to get more visibility, more political priorities, eventually more budget if needed. I'm not so convinced of that. But it has to get much better organized. That's an internal challenge of the business community. But in addition to that, there are other kind of external type of challenges, and some of you have already commented them without any order. Maybe the first is the people-related challenge, which is the skills, the education, the training, the adaptation of the workforce, starting by the managers, the CEOs, and all kinds of employees, to be able to provide with their own individual skills and organizational skills a much better service to all types of tourists who visit us. And that it starts by language skills, digital skills, cultural skills. If we want to attract more Chinese, more Asian, more South American, more African tourists, we should know a bit better their wishes, their cultures, not only their languages. So that's a big issue, and it's not an easy one. The second one maybe, or a second one, all these have been spelled out, by the way. I sent it to Ufi 1 month ago or so in the speech that our commissioner, the new commissioner for tourism, the Polish lady Elżbieta Bieńkowska, has delivered end of January in Madrid. Ufi has it, and if she wants, she has 2 documents that might deserve that you have a look at them. But they are all spelled out there. The second one, maybe, I think we have to adapt and streamline the very, very complex regulatory framework that affects tourism. And not only, and not even mainly at European level. We only have at European level around 13, 15 basic regulations in the VAT area, in the passenger rights area, in the consumer protection area, competition general law. That's it. But there are a huge number of very complex, not always coherent regulations at national, regional, and local level. And we have, on top of that, we have a set of important, very dynamic, very innovative new players, the digital new players, which are forcing you, all of you, and all of us, to reflect, to try to adapt this framework, and to find out solutions, not via the courts. via the court cases which are already popping up. I think there is a need, and I come again to the cooperation and collaboration, a need of dialogue between all the players. It is not logical that this dialogue between the digital players and the hospitality in particular industry is dealt with in the court. So
I'm sure, Peter, I know that you also have your very strong views on those challenges that you see that we face as a big business in the UK.
Well, I suppose travel. I'm surrounded by genteel people who all say terribly nice things, and Pedro is being terribly polite about the UK because he's from the Commission and he could hardly do anything else, could he? Look, let's face it, in this room, there's a big thing that's going on around us outside, which is there's an upcoming EU referendum. We are, as an industry, we've got to have our heads about us here. There's a danger of us sleepwalking into real danger for this industry if we don't stand up and be counted. Now, it's not my place as a chief executive of a UK hotel business to advise the British public on whether we should stay in or out of the European, and nor is it my place to advise the Prime Minister on what constitutes a good deal. But it absolutely is my place to say that if the result, one way or the other, is to lead to it being more difficult for people to visit this country who we want to come here, then we've got a problem as an industry. So I think the first thing we need to do is wake up. Almost a year ago, we watched, many of us in this room, as the United Kingdom came precariously close to being broken up. Because a lot of people said, well, that can't possibly happen. And there was a lot of scaremongering, and we waited for leadership, and it didn't really come. We as business people have got to take a lead on some of these issues because there is little point in us pressing as an industry for an extension of the Schengen arrangements to permit Chinese tourists to come to Britain, which we've been successful thanks to the government of trying to experiment with that. There's little point in having all of that if we're going to turn around by the end of 2017 and find ourselves with even more restrictions on free movement into the UK. So whether we are on one side or other of the political divide, I think that is the principal issue we confront as an industry for our competitiveness. Everything else comes second to that, because if you can't get in the country, what the infrastructure is, what the attractions are, what the quality of service is, what the booking path is irrelevant. So that, I think, I put to you, is the single biggest thing that we've got to confront, and we have to be a powerful voice as an industry behind that issue, whichever side we stand on the EU issue. Within the UK, though, I think it's important for us to remember in a market like this that half the people staying in hotels in the United Kingdom tonight are from the United Kingdom. So while international inbound tourism is tremendously important, some of the huge opportunities exist in promoting our own country. Britain is a great country. I've lived and worked all over the world. I've had the same experiences that many of you have on this panel of seeing great things happen in other countries. But 2 weeks ago, I travelled around the country to celebrate our 30th anniversary as a business. And there's nothing finer than watching the sun come up over Arundel Castle or watching it go down sort of the other end of the Leith Walk. They're amazing things to see in the United Kingdom, and we have to promote them. And I think that's the real force we need, because if we're going to regenerate areas like Northern Ireland, if we're going to create economic growth for the northern powerhouse that the government wants to create, tourism has to be at the centre of it. And so my argument would be that for Britain to succeed economically, it's about making the country open for business for tourism, and it's about creating the infrastructure to move people around Britain when they get here, so that much as we love London, the United Kingdom is not only London to foreign visitors.
Thank you. Faith, from your experiences in the United States, which of those do you think we might best bring to bear to address some of these issues that we're hearing about today?
Well, one of the things that I hear very clearly in the United States is that, our government, as you know, it's been a challenge in terms of Congress and Senate and having them work together. So business has had to take the leadership position. And we've had to find the solution working with NGOs and government in a way to be able to move the agenda forward, despite what has been said. And so really making travel and tourism front and center, or now Obama does actually recognize that, some of the things that you're doing here, but then developing a USA branding program, which, I'm not sure in the UK what you're doing in that area, but really marketing to the consumer and then putting that in the consumer's hands who are saying, yes, we want to go to that country and make it easier for us to do so. So that's some of the things that we've done there. But just talking about your co-opetition, am I saying that correctly? To me, that's about collaboration. And in this country, what many of our peers have done, and we've done that with other hotel and hospitality companies, is we did a stakeholder engagement platform, and we worked with International Tourism Partnership. And we did with over 15 hotel companies, as well as 20 NGOs. And we sat there and said, what's material for the industry? And what we found was that labor and water were front and center. And labor with regards to fair wages and the impact in terms of human rights and how we were actually training and educating our young people. And that, to me, as you were saying, we have to do more of that, where we have to collaborate across the industry with NGOs, with other companies to develop solutions for the industry, because that's the only way you're going to make an impact. And then when we go forward and present an agenda, it's a united front. And I think that's really critical as we look at some of the things that are going on here.
Indeed, and Margaret, from your experiences of your campaigning in relation to the lowering of VAT rates in Ireland and your campaigning with regard to the reduction in air passenger duty, do you see that the campaigns that you've been involved in have been paying off, have been having success, been getting traction?
Well, I think they've been getting traction, and I think some of the, shall we say, innovation for that came exactly from the British Hospitality Association under the direction of UFI, but also through the Northern Ireland Hotels Federation, because all of them saw that tourism was a principal driver in the local economy, in regional economies in the UK. But in our particular case, in the case of Northern Ireland, and I agree with the gentleman about UK, if it was to leave the European Union, that would have major consequences for us on the island of Ireland, because we have a land border with the south of Ireland, which would be remaining within the Eurozone and also remaining within Europe, and it would become increasingly developed and difficult and a major challenge for us to compete. So with those issues and the need for fiscal flexibilities, we saw the need to persuade and act in collaboration as a group of MPs across parties in Westminster, whether it was the parties in Northern Ireland and also, shall we say, SNP, Plaid and the Green Party, to see if there may be possibilities to persuade government to lower VAT on tourism products, because VAT here is 20%, and in other countries, in 23 other countries, it is much lower within the European Union, and that was having an impact and was acting as a challenge to our tourism industry, because we know of the modelling that was done by the Treasury in terms by Professor Blake, who used the Treasury's own economic model, showed it was revenue neutral and it could be done. So we are looking for that fiscal incentive. We're also looking for a zero rate of air passenger duty in terms of regional economies. And if I look at Ireland, in Dublin, they brought in zero rate of air passenger duty, and that means that a lot of visitors come directly in through Dublin Airport. So as a consequence of a conglomeration, or shall we say an amalgamation of issues, we brought forward a motion to Parliament and to Westminster Hall in February of last year for debate. We also had early day motions, and one of your speakers earlier referred to the fact that we've got about 800 MPs from across parties, including Tory and Labour, who support that early day motion that was replicated in this Parliament. And in fact, we're setting up the all-party group on the visitor economy next Tuesday in the House of Commons. And again, that has to have representatives from all parties, including the government, to persuade government to bring forward a lower duty on VAT on tourism. Also, other fiscal incentives, such as VAT, such not only as VAT on tourism, but air passenger duty. And I'm glad to see today the Minister for Tourism in Northern Ireland, Jonathan Bell, who's going to be addressing us later, because that is one thing we have. The Northern Ireland Executive supports us in this particular campaign. So it is about collaboration. It is about ensuring that we have all our ducks in a row. And in fact, we'll be holding an event that has been organised and sponsored by Caroline Lucas of the Green Party in September in the House of Commons to bring the hospitality industry face to face with government and with the parties in Westminster to ensure that government is persuaded that this is a good thing for the local economy, good thing for the UK economy, and there can be benefits, and it won't act as a disincentive, that in fact it is important to us.
Thank you, Margaret. And another question I'd like to pose to the panel before we throw open to the floor for questions is obviously the question of the Chinese visitors to the UK. The BHA have had a notable success in the last few days. I think the central government has announced a pilot scheme for the simplification of visa applications for Chinese visitors. Do you think that we're doing enough, that we could be doing more to attract Chinese visitors? Gerald, do you have a
Well,
view
yes,
on
I
that?
think we've been talking for many, many years between the WTTC and the World Economic Forum and the BHA, but just generally around the world about facilitating visas overall. And why does it have to remain so complicated? There are people in China who have to travel probably for 10 hours in order to go to a consulate to get a visa, whereas we have some very good examples at the moment worldwide for electronic visas, such as the ESTA system in the United States, the Schengen in Europe. The Australian system is very strong. We've managed to persuade, I think, a lot of the ASEAN countries who've now formed their own economic community to look as well at having a common visa entry system. And I think it's making it easy to buy is the normal principle we have in salesmanship. And we should be trying that a lot more. And I think that somehow the perception from outside is the UK always stands alone for perhaps very good reasons, but especially when you see the situation in Calais with so many people trying to hop on trucks to come over to the UK. But it is a shame that somehow the UK and Europe, and UK is still part of the European Union, cannot be part of Schengen. It also affects Ireland, as the Minister knows very well, in that we always have had a common travel area, and some years ago we managed to persuade the governments, and especially talking to the Irish government, to recognise multiple re-entry visas for people coming into Britain. Particularly, I was looking at people from the Gulf at the time who were high-spend tourists who didn't really realise that Ireland was a separate country, because if they travelled domestically, say from London to Dublin, arrive in Dublin and find they should have had a visa, which of course is crazy. But they did do it, and they brought it in for 29 different countries. And I think we've got to keep promoting this idea of making it easier for people to get visas, not to drop security, but having a very common electronic visa system worldwide would make it much more secure, because you would know exactly who you're dealing with. And one last thing while I'm speaking is that I still don't understand why a tourism minister has to have 3 different portfolios. Surely if our industry is important as we say it is, if it's 10% of global GDP, the Minister for Tourism should be one of the most senior ministerships in the government.
Would you like to comment on the situation regarding Chinese visitors?
Sure, one can always do more. The Chinese are remarkable travellers, as we know, as our European expert mentioned. We all need to prepare better for the Chinese, but they're certainly going elsewhere. We've had outbound offices there for over 10 years. We're part of the group that organized the recent movement of the Tien's Health Group to France, Paris, and Nice, 5,700 individuals who were rewarded by that company's health group with an incredible incentive. They certainly didn't choose Britain, unfortunately. Britain is seen in China as a country that is turning people away every day. I was born in South Africa, and that country's done an even better job than Britain, so we can't complain too much. They've pretty much chased away all Chinese business at this point by requiring biometric fingerprints for a visa, and also trying to address child slavery, now requiring something called an unabridged birth certificate for anyone arriving in South Africa with children under the age of 18, even Canadians and Americans. So countries are remarkable what they'll do to turn travelers away. As I mentioned earlier, President Obama, who certainly hasn't always moved that fast, did do very well 5 years ago, opening additional consulates and processes to bring more Chinese to America, and they more than doubled the numbers, whereas Britain, and Mr. Cameron said similar things some years ago, hasn't been able to achieve that. So I can assure you there's more opportunities, and I know all of you will welcome them. So whatever we can do to bring more Chinese travelers to these borders.
Pedro, you wanted to make a final observation there.
Just a comment on the whole issue of visa, China, and so on, because it is a very good example of what could be done if a much stronger cooperation was established, not only at the industry level, but also between member states, even between those who are not members of the Schengen area, like UK and Ireland. Just to tell you that the current Schengen visa code is not very useful for that. We have made in the Commission 2 years ago a big proposal to simplify, to harmonize, to facilitate the visa procedures for those travelers. But because of the fact that the tourism priorities are not sufficiently high in the policy agenda of the member states of the Schengen area, all the simplification, facilitation proposals have been, not all, most of them have been scrapped down by the member states because the ministers which are in the council working group are experts coming from the Home Affairs or Foreign Affairs ministries. The tourism ministry should have played within the European Union, Schengen area at least, a much stronger role. And I presume in your case, I have seen that your minister is trying hard to facilitate the visas. By the way, the electronic visa is not the best solution. The ESTA, by the way, of the US is not a visa, it's a tax. It's a tax applicable to those foreigners, travelers, which do not need a visa. And that's a completely different story. By the way, a tax out of which 10 out of the $14 have been devoted by the Obama government to increase hugely the budget of Brand USA. Another example of good cooperation between the industry, the federal government, and the federal state of the US, the Californias and so on, which might be used as an example at European level also.
Thank you, Pedro.
I just wonder, though, if we broaden it out a little bit, having run a business with responsibility for China, and what Brett said is right at the beginning about the people are travelling, I think in the UK we need to wake up a bit to just how competitive the world is becoming for the tourism pound or euro or dollar. And I think that's what Brett was saying earlier. I think we sometimes forget, having been outside the UK in Asia and then in the United States and back here, I think we forget that we're not running as fast as we need to be to keep up here. France is doing a fantastic job of promoting the attractions of France, and Italy the same, to Chinese tourists. Britain is not high on the list of Chinese tourists' dream destinations in the way that it should be, given what we have here to offer. And I think as a country, we've probably got to get serious about our role in the world and the fact that tourism really does matter, and we've got to step up our efforts to promote it.
But don't you think now that the UK visa can be applied for in the same process as the Schengen visa in China, that this will address a lot of this issue, and you will have an influx of Chinese tourists?
I think it's a big step, but I don't think it's about just that. I think it's about saying, how welcoming do we make London, the United Kingdom, to Chinese visitors? How easy is it to get instructions to go somewhere in Chinese characters? How easy is it to find someone who can speak Mandarin or Cantonese? How easy is it to do that? Now, the luxury high-end businesses have done that very well so far. If you look at some of the luxury retailers, they've done that very satisfactorily. But as a country, we're still only beginning. I travel in and out of Marylebone Station every day. Bicester Shopping Village, one of the dream destinations for a lot of inbound Chinese visitors. We're opening a hotel in Bicester. For sure, it'll have noodle kettles in it to stop the Chinese visitors from brewing noodles in the tea kettle, which is costing us a bit of money at the moment. So for sure, but it's those little things. It's when I get to Marylebone, where are the signs for Bicester Shopping Village in Chinese? How many of the ticket machines work in Chinese? How many people on the station can speak Chinese? Unless we get serious about what it takes to look welcoming, to be welcoming, I think we're not going to get there. So I think visas is a big step. As I said, I think that's a huge, important issue for getting access. But I think it's about mentality too. Britain has got to compete much more aggressively for foreign tourism pounds than ever before. And I think other countries are stealing a march. And as Gerald says, a dedicated Minister for Tourism would be a start, but a government that got serious about tourism would be even better.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think we should try and take some questions from the floor now. Is there anyone who'd like to ask one of our panellists a question? Do we have a mic ready? There's a lady here. Thank you.
Thank you. They were very great comments. There's a lot of talk by the governments that entrepreneurs and SMEs are really the ones that are bringing the most new jobs into the market. However, the grants that used to be available both from the UK government and the European Union are not there anymore unless you're doing a social enterprise. What's happening with that, and why those fundings aren't as available unless they are in a form of loan or investments from another companies?
Is anyone able to comment on that? Grants? Pedro?
If I may, I don't know how the funds are used here in the UK, but at European level, the European funds, since the year 2000, tourism has been one of the priorities of the European structural funds. Most of them depend on how the regional governments, not even the national ones, put tourism high as a priority in their regional development programs. It's up to each region. Here in the UK, I presume you have the 4 regions. But up to you to include or not tourism as a priority to get access to the huge amount of European structural funds which are there since a long time. It was a priority in the period 2000-2006, 7-13, and now in the current one, 14-20, there's not any more tourism, but there are 11 thematic objectives, out of which 7 at least are accessible for tourism SMEs, for tourism public stakeholders to get access to these European funds. It's up to each regional government to organize themselves to get from their government's tourism the sufficient priority, depending on the pressure that the relevant industry is able to do, and to get access. There are a huge amount of, more than in the period 2007-2013, if I remember well, 17 billion euros have been invested in tourism-related projects all over the European Union, so it's not too bad.
And I think perhaps that's something you could address with one of the BHA officers who are here today, and maybe it's something you could get them to put on their agenda if it's not something that you feel is being addressed sufficiently. Do we have another question from the floor? There's a gentleman here. Do we have a microphone? Just here. Oh, okay.
Tim Gardner, Chairman of Tourism for All UK. I'd like to ask the panel what their thoughts are about whether the industry and influencers are doing enough to meet the needs of the ageing population in the UK, the vast market opportunity that it represents. Are we meeting the needs in terms of access and in terms of information?
I think we partly addressed that one, possibly.
Aging.
Did you say? Aging. The grey panthers, I've heard them called. Yes. Yes, that would be great.
I think it's a significant issue. I think it requires change in 2 or 3 areas. At Travelodge, we're having to change 2 or 3 things, I think. I think, first of all, it's about physical buildings, for sure. It's about dealing with an older population that is staying mobile for much longer than historically was the case and wants to get out and about and is a huge, significant volume of business. So I think it's making room design that fits with that kind of thing. We're having to consider things with the population living older with more medication. We're having to consider things like where we store medicines for our customers. That's a frequent request for us now, whereas maybe 5 or 10 years ago, that was not a big issue for refrigeration or for other things that go with it. So at one end of the stream. But I think the other is about the booking process, making it easy for people to understand, very simple things around how big the font sizes are. I'm already finding myself that sometimes I have to squint pretty carefully to look at even what the big print is, much less the small print. So I think it's thinking about things like that. But I think it's perhaps symptomatic of a bigger thing, which is I think as an industry, we've always got to be on top of what's coming next. What's coming next for Britain is hopefully a more international tourism base, but it's also an older population, and I think increasingly one where those with physical challenges are also a big part of our society. I was speaking at an event the other day. One of the things I said was that what's really changed is people's attitude since the Paralympics, I think, particularly, about those with physical impairments. I think 20 years ago, people saw things like the Disabilities Act, especially as it came into force, as an unnecessary imposition. I think now people see it as an essential part of making Britain accessible to everyone. And I think as an industry, we're stepping up to that, and I think we should continue to be responsible in doing it.
Margaret, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you. I think the question underlies the point that we have now an ageing population. We have people that maybe have a lot of monetary capital at their disposal and therefore want to spend it. But there needs to be that collaboration between the sector and government, and there needs to be more joined up, shall we say, working between various government departments. working with the industry to ensure that tourism is put at the #1 priority within government as a means of bringing in capital and ensuring that all sectors within our society, including the disabled, including older people, are allowed to be able to enjoy the attractions, the hotels, and the visitor amenities within Britain and Northern Ireland.
I also see that in terms of the aging population, it's a family unit. And especially in the Asian culture, Chinese culture, it's not just the aging parent, but it's the whole family who's together. So as we look at this and make it, more accessible, you have to look at how it's impacting the whole family who's traveling together, and how do you accommodate for that? Because I see as the population is aging, it's really about the family. And I think that's a good thing at the end of the day, because you have more people traveling together. So how do we make that easy for that entire family to travel? How do we make it accessible? And I think that the country who really makes it an easy, accessible program is gonna win, to be honest with you.
And since we don't wear glasses in the shower, can we please write shampoo in big letters when we get in there?
Pedro, briefly, because we've only got time for one more question.
I'm sorry, but just to tell you that since 2007, the European Commission is leading and is promoting this type of exchanges and travel between of senior people, of young people, of family people, because we do consider, I have not had the time to spell it out, the demographic challenge and the seasonality challenge are very key. And we tend to promote these trips of seniors, of families, within mainly the low and medium season, which is another big challenge for the whole of the tourism industry at the European level.
Thank you. We've got time for one more question. The gentleman here with the microphone.
Martin Barrow, I'm a director of the China-Britain Business Council. I entirely agree with the points made about Chinese visas. Can I suggest that we need to collaborate together to have common lines on this? Collaboration has been talked about a lot. I think we should have a follow-up. I mean, we've been communicating with the BHA, with the UK-China Visa Alliance. I think we all need to work together on this so that we have a common line to move forward on these critical issues. Yes, there's been some move forward, but there's a lot more to do in simplification. So let's work together and make this happen.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to draw our panel to a close, but if everyone could show their appreciation to our distinguished group of panellists today, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Thank you for organizing such a passionate group of leaders on the stage. We could have carried on all morning, of course, going into the various issues that were raised, and certainly some of the things that I got out, that we need to wake up to the competition around the world, and we must remain open to the world. There's a need for fiscal flexibility, and there's a need for a dedicated tourism minister. Anyway, thank you, Karen, for organizing that session. And I just wanted to have a particular thanks to Gerald Lawless. Gerald, where are you? Gerald, thank you for joining us today. We know you're on holiday at the moment. You've made a special trip to join us this morning. In Ireland, exactly. So thank you very, very much.